Pure, unpolluted waters are precious, but they're hard to find, even in Ireland. 30 years ago, there were over 500 totally unpolluted freshwater sites that were wild and natural. Now only 21 of these still have the highest water quality. Kerry is one of our few remaining places where pristine waters can still be found, and the life in these rivers and lakes reflects the purity of the water.
I've come here to find Ireland's longest living animal, unpolluted perla, the freshwater pearl mussel. They live to be about 120 years old. That means that lots of the pearl mussels living in these waters were alive during the 1916 rising. But they only live in really clean, unpolluted waters. That means they're extinct in most of Ireland's rivers.
So why have we seen such a rapid decline in our rivers and lakes in such a short time? And what can be done to bring them back to better health? The Iveragh Peninsula in Kerry is incredibly beautiful. Because it's such a sparsely populated mountainous region, it's one of the few places left in Ireland with pristine water quality, where untamed and unpolluted rivers are rich with wildlife. The McGillicuddy's Reeks are wonderfully dramatic mountains to explore, and I want to follow this river to its source, which is the highest quality water you can find in Ireland. Local mountain guide Darach O'Murchu is helping me to navigate.
It's not a great day for a hike, is it?
No, it's quite wild, but like, it's just great to be out here anyways. Like,
There's such a huge volume of water.
Yes, it's amazingly pristine water. It just comes from the mountains, the background and up there. There's a couple of beautiful lakes up there and really lovely mountain streams feeding it.
There's a lot of rain in the Iveragh Peninsula though in particular, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, depending on what figures you go look at, maybe up to 3,000 millimeters a year, which is quite a lot, like, you know.
3 meters a year?
Yeah, 3 meters, maybe even more, you know, especially around here, this valley here especially.
What's that amazing looking crag thing up there?
They call it the Hag's Tooth. And of course, this whole valley is called the Hag's Glen or Cown Collie. Yeah,
So that's her tooth.
Yeah, that's her tooth up there. She's lost her tooth.
Okay. Is that a frog?
Wow. How are you, frog? Pretty much where the path is where the water is coming down. The water drains down where the path was.
Wow! It's really, really beautiful. I'm glad we kept trekking on through the rain.
Yeah, well worth it. You know, it's good to see where it all comes from. You know, the water that we drink. This kind of place is where it is, where it starts off.
It was too misty to see Carrantoul, the mountain that rises up behind the lakes. But I've seen what I came to see, the source of this pristine river. The rivers and lakes in this region are beautifully clean and healthy. They're ranked as Q5, which is the best possible water quality. I had heard that the freshwater pearl mussel lives here, a species that's become very rare and hard to find. To find out more about them, I met up with Richard O'Callaghan from the Kerry Life Project. The project team is trying to develop new approaches to protect this species in these catchments.
This is home to one of the largest populations of mussels in Ireland. So there's about 2.5 million mussels here.
2.5 million freshwater pearl mussels in this river?
Yeah, they're not all in one stretch of the river, but you have a huge population.
And your project is about keeping this water pristine?
Absolutely, and the mussel requires even higher than pristine in some ways, and that's really what we're trying to ensure. What we have is a species that has really high standards.
And how come this river here is such high water quality?
The main reason is that we don't have the same pressures in terms of land use. The land itself isn't suitable for intensive agriculture or housing or urban areas. We've no town in this area, for example. In these sorts of catchments, agriculture and forestry are the two main land uses that we have.
And what are the actual impacts of farming and of forestry on the river that would damage the habitat for the freshwater pearl mussel?
The main issues are excess silt, which is fine sediment or soil that gets washed off the land from farming or drainage or from forestry. Nutrients, so when they apply slurry or fertiliser in these high rainfall areas, there's a chance that it'll get washed out into the river, and that causes issues for the mussel down the line. If you get too much nutrient input, you get huge quantities of algae growing in the river. So that's really the impact.
So it's not something, you don't need like a load of toxic chemicals, it's just soil, sand, silt, nutrients, these kind of everyday things.
There's a bit more getting to the river now, and that might be because there's more machinery being used in farming and forestry. But we're fortunate in these areas that we don't have that level of pressure, and this is just one of the best chances we have to keep the species viable here in Ireland.
So this region is a last hold for the freshwater pearl mussel, which is such a sensitive life form, but so quietly resilient too. You have to be careful and respectful of them in their natural habitat. Making sure that the community here know all about them is key to ensuring a future for this species. In nearby Glencar, I got to tag along with a school outing to the river, organised by the Kerry Life project as part of their education and outreach work. Karen O'Neill is doing a PhD on the freshwater pearl mussel, and she's working with the Kerry Life project. But she's also a former pupil of the school.
You actually went to this primary school?
Yeah, and I never expected I'd end up working as an environmental scientist in the area, but here we are.
That is brilliant. How was it that you got to study the pearl mussel then, having grown up in this area?
Well, it's interesting. I was really only vaguely aware of them when I was younger. It was my father that said, there's this mussel in the area, we don't know much about it, why don't you study them? And here I am, a couple of years later.
And now you're taking the same kids from your primary school. I see it.
The kids here are determined to see some of the aquatic life in the river, and hopefully to see some freshwater pearl mussels.
So it's not normally this high, guys, isn't it? Does that mean it's going to be more difficult to get in and see the pearl mussels?
Yeah. You can tell a lot about the river just by looking at the little insects there.
There are plenty of other insects and creepy crawlies for the kids to see first. A healthy river like this is just teeming with life.
Who has seen this caddisfly larvae case? It's a home that they build themselves out of sand and
He's
stuff.
trying to come out.
I know.
You've got a little water beetle.
Okay.
This is a mayfly. It indicates really clean water.
Would you have thought there would be so much life in a little bag of river water before you saw it?
No.
We're really hoping to see the freshwater pearl mussels today, but you can't just collect them or take them out of the water without damaging them. So a special instrument called a bathoscope is used to view the riverbed.
I can see kind of stones and grass and things.
The water is a little stirred up after a rainy few weeks, but this is a high-status site, a really clean river. So it doesn't have a lot of silt on the riverbed or too much algae growing, both of which can smother the habitat for the freshwater pearl mussel.
If there's too much fine sediment gets into the mussel's habitat, it tends to cover over the surface. And the young mussels, much like salmon eggs, need clean water flowing through the gravel underneath the immediate surface. And they need it for 7 to 10 years. So they really are very susceptible to any impact from sediment or nutrients increasing algal growth.
And the freshwater pearl mussel that are found in these rivers, they're quite an amazing animal.
The freshwater pearl mussel is the largest invertebrate in Ireland. It's also the longest living animal in Ireland. And it's incredible to think that some of the small mussels inside in this river might be the size of your hand or older than the country itself, or older than the state itself. They live up to 120 years. So they're really an incredible species. Unfortunately, they're critically endangered worldwide, and they are likely to go extinct within this generation of mussels unless things change.
It's really nice to know that the next generation, the young ones coming up, know that there's a special thing here. There's a really clean river and it needs, I suppose, special treatment to keep it that way.
Absolutely. Freshwater pearl mussel is termed an umbrella species. And it's called an umbrella species because by conserving the mussel and its sensitivities, we can protect a whole ecosystem, including the salmon, the insects that live around in the river, up onto the wider land outside the river and all the biodiversity that's entailed. So we're really playing the long game here, and we've an active outreach program to the schools to encourage the young people to take an interest in conservation.
Because we know that pristine rivers, I guess, are on the decline in Ireland, we know that ours are very special. And I've got such a deepened respect for the rivers now that I understand them as an ecosystem and something that is so unique around the world now. We don't have much freshwater pearl mussel habitat left, and to know that we have this in our area is very exciting.
The fact that the freshwater pearl mussel is so rare tells us a lot about the quality of water in most of our rivers, where it can't survive. I'm going to continue my journey to find out what's being done to ensure that the pristine waters here don't end up like rivers in other parts of the country. It's hard to believe that there are so few pristine waters left in Ireland. Only 21 sites, down from 500 some 30 years ago. I want to find out why we've been losing them so rapidly. In Carlow, the River Barrow flows through farms, villages and towns, all of which have impacted the water quality here.
When a river is subject to some pressure, you tend to lose the most sensitive insects. And by examining the community of insects that we get from a sample, it gives us a very good snapshot of the quality of the river and what health it's in. This one has quite a lot of issues. You know, the cattle have been in trampling this site as well, so we can see there's quite a lot of erosion going on here. When the sediment and the mud that the cattle have trampled on, when that makes its way into the river, it brings a lot of problems for the river. It leads to nutrient pollution and also pollution from the mud itself, because that smothers the habitat and reduces the quality of the river as well.
So that it's easy to gather samples, Gary deliberately disturbs the gravel to stir up the life forms that live on the riverbed.
Then we can put the insects in. So you can see quite quickly there's quite a lot of filamentous algae here in this sample, and that's a clear indicator of excessive nutrients in the river.
That's a sign of pollution, really, is it?
Yeah, it's one of the most visible signs of pollution. It means that the river's under pressure from excessive nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus.
So it's fertilisers, basically, or slurry kind of things that run off the land into the river.
It's one of the clearest indicators. Sometimes you get a very excessive growths of it in the river, and that has the effect of smothering off a lot of the habitat.
And all these little guys wriggling, there's loads of little wrigglers here. What are they?
This river it seems to be quite impacted by pollution, and one of the indicators of this are these small little chironomids.
They survive in polluted rivers.
So we can see straight away that there are lots of them wriggling around.
And you can see they wriggle in a kind of figure of eight type movement.
Wriggle.
Yeah.
So they're a sign of pollution. They exist in polluted rivers.
They're quite tolerant of low oxygen. So
if they're there in very high numbers, then that's a clear bad sign.
over there, for example, there's a discharge from a local wastewater treatment plant.
Oh, that one there?
Just over there, yeah, you can just see it, and you know that'll have an impact on the site as well.
Wastewater is often not cleaned adequately before being discharged into rivers, and there are hundreds of treatment plants all over the country.
We did some research recently and looked at the pressures looking at rivers in Ireland, and we found that agriculture is actually the most widespread impact because it covers such a large area of the landscape in Ireland. So that's one of the more pervasive pressures.
So it's a cumulative impact.
Essentially
it's accumulation
that, yeah.
of all the different whether it's wastewater treatment or agriculture
Yeah,
or forestry, they're all
Yeah.
contributing a bit to the problem.
Like the Q5, very high pristine sites that you might find in Kerry, for example. A lot of those have a different bag of pressures that you're operating on them. Forestry is the most pervasive pressure in a lot of the high status sites.
Back on the Ivra Peninsula in Kerry, there's a lot of forestry. The management of conifer forests generally involves drainage, fertilisers and clear felling, all of which can give rise to excess nutrients and silt entering waterways and causing pollution. Coillte, which owns and manages a lot of the forestry in this area, is working with the Kerry Life project to trial some new approaches.
I suppose with previous practices, a lot of the Sitka spruce plantations would have been planted right up to the river edges.
So what would be the problems typically with managing a forestry, whether it's planting it or felling it, and water quality?
When you're felling the trees, there's the release of nutrients from the needles into the site, okay? When a lot of these areas would have been planted back in the 60s, they probably would have received one treatment of fertiliser, and predominantly would have got phosphate, granulated rock phosphate fertiliser.
Phosphate's a small amount of phosphate in the river can do a lot of damage.
Small amount of phosphate in the river can do damage, it can. But I suppose, you know, that phosphate is contained within the trees, so when the trees are felled, there can be that potential release.
So in a site like this, where it would have been planted up kind of 30, 40 years ago, I'm taking it that there's going to be challenges for water quality when you're cutting down these trees.
There is very much.
One of the trial solutions is underway.
So just be mindful going in, it's just a little slippy after the heavy rain.
And what's going on in here?
Okay, so the operation that we're looking at here is what's called a halo tinning.
Okay.
The idea with the halo tinning is that when you look around, we'll see there's individual birches or maybe small groups of birch trees trying to grow up, but the spruce has kind of covered in over the birch, you know, and it obviously needs light to grow. So what has happened here then is that the birch is dying off. So the spruce trees, we're going to ring bark them. We'll cut about 4 or 5 centimetres in diameter around the tree.
So we know that when you cut right through the bark of a tree all the way around, it'll die.
The tree will die, yes. It's going to favour the birch tree now. So the birch tree is going to, because the tree is going to start to die off around it, it's going to create the light, and that's going to allow the birch tree to start to
And why do you
grow
want
again,
more
okay?
birch?
We want more birch here because we want to, I suppose, in time here, to create more of a native woodland.
Okay, so you're effectively you're killing some of the Sitka spruce here
Around
to
it,
give a
yes,
chance for the
yes.
birch to come back. So why don't you just cut down the Sitka spruce? Why ring bark it?
To minimise the interventions on the site. Okay, so we're actually bringing no machines onto the site here, so there's going to be no ground disturbance. It's a manual intervention, so it has all been done by hand, because we're right up here, up to the riverbed where the population of the freshwater pearl mussel is here. It's highly sensitive.
Pine needles can cause pollution and acidification in the waterways. Bernard explained that when they use this approach, the needles fall off more gradually, instead of all in one go, as would normally happen in a clear fell. Log dams in the drainage trenches also help to stem the flow of water from the plantation, and silt traps help to filter silt from the water.
Bit by bit.
Bit by bit,
This will be
it's going to take
transformed
time. It's going to
back to a
transform
native woodland.
back into a native woodland. Yes, indeed.
Very good.
It's great to see the work that Kerry Life and Coillte are trialling here. Native woodlands and trees, like birch, can be beneficial for water quality. But sadly, this kind of management isn't the norm, and all over the country, clear felling and drainage from plantations can still be damaging to water quality.
Just followed the stream out of the forest to the river here and just spotted 2 dead freshwater pearl mussels, the shells.
Forestry isn't the only threat to water quality in these high-status sites. Agriculture can result in pollution too, although in this part of Kerry, farming isn't intensive. Livestock simply graze among the semi-natural grasslands. Here on the Griffin's farm, there are woodlands, pastures, and 2 miles of river. The Griffins have signed up to work with the Kerry Life project, so they manage this farm in such a way that the river stays as healthy as can be.
How are you, Aidan?
That's better, Anja. How are you?
Good. It's a grand morning.
It's all right. No, in fairness, sun is shining, so we won't be complaining.
And what are you doing there now?
Pre-placement of bales as part of the measures for the Kerry Life project.
Okay.
We place bales in the summer, start of autumn for feeding the cows outside for the winter.
And why would you do that? What difference does that make?
Prevents rotting up the ground in the winter time, in and out consistently with a tractor. So
it means if you've got the bales placed before, you're not having to come in with the tractor when the ground is wet?
Yeah, when the ground is very, yeah.
Is there much that you've had to do differently since starting with this project?
Fencing of the rivers, we fence along the streams, footbridges for cows to cross the streams, prevents the cows from damaging the banks and stepping on the mussels inside the river.
Would you have always been aware that they were there?
I knew there was something there. You'd often see the, the old shells and stuff, but other than that, I took no notice of it.
And then what did you think of it when the project started up and people were telling you you've got something really special in this area?
I was sceptical, but like once they came down, they spoke about it to us and we said we'd see what we can do to help.
And apart from keeping the cattle out of the water, out of the streams, is there much else that you've done differently?
We've installed water trucks, whereas before cows were drinking out of a stream or out of a river. I'll show you, it is just over here. I said we were questioning it at the start, like, would the cows get used to it? But so far, they've been fairly good to us and they've been drinking away.
And how many of these do you have on the farm?
We have 6 of them on the farm in total.
So how does this work?
Okay, so I said if you just shove that there, I have to give it a couple of pumps, but...
So as they push this, the water comes up?
The water comes up, yeah.
That is brilliant. And this doesn't need any electricity or anything, this is just a pump?
No, cows do all the work.
And did it take the cows long to learn how to use this?
A bit. They were used to drinking out of the river and out of the stream, so it's a bit of a change for them, but once they got the hang of it, they were okay.
And the pipe just goes down to the river?
Yeah, pipes down into the river, into the stream.
It's very clever, it's very simple.
Simple idea, yeah, and it works. Thanks be to God.
In every water catchment in Ireland, the local authorities now have community water officers. They can support communities who want to take action to protect their rivers and lakes. Efforts like this are essential if we're to halt the decline of our most wonderful wild rivers and lakes, to ensure that we'll still have some pristine waters in another 30 years.
If we value clean waters, we're going to have to change the way we do things. We know how. It's just a matter of deciding that this is important. The pearl mussel is telling us a story. It's up to us if we choose to listen.